Hi everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about something very simple but something very important. This is about an error that often second mate candidates make in their oral examination and something that you should be aware of because this is again based on feedback that I've got from the oral examiners. And today's topic is not only when to call master but also why do you forget to call the master. So you guys, if you start preparing for orals or when you are doing your written examinations, you will study about the circumstances in which you can call the master. Now those circumstances are defined in many books. It's defined in bridge resource management and also bridge watchkeeping and other subjects as well. And they define circumstances such as restricted visibility when you should call master, or when a traffic situation bothers you, that is when you should call master, or if you get warnings of heavy weather or a rescue situation or an emergency scenario where you have to call the master. Now these are obvious scenarios and I understand that you do call the master in those obvious scenarios. So there are two aspects to this today's topic. The first one is, of course, students know that they have to call master, but they forget to call master. So sometimes it could be in a ROR situation where you are trying to take action and you do everything and then you forget to call the master. So the surveyor will be very unhappy with that. So remember, when you go for your second mate oral examination, you have the luxury of calling the master whenever you want to. Alright, so this luxury is not available to you after your second mates. So when you go for your chief mates orals or your master's orals, this luxury is not available to you. You cannot call the master because you are pretty much the second in command or the command of the vessel. So remember to use this luxury. And why I made this video today is because students remember to use this call master point in the obvious scenarios. So when the surveyor says, okay, visibility is becoming poor, or if you see in a ground vessel, what will you do? These are circumstances when students, or most of the students, they do remember to call the master. But there are some other circumstances where students forget to call the master. So they mention everything but they forget to call the master because you have pretty much memorized the answer when to call master, but you forget one key aspect. Whenever you are in doubt, whenever something bothers you, you can actually call the master. And this is something that the students forget. So they remember calling the master in obvious scenarios, but they forget to call the master in not so obvious but necessary scenarios. Alright, I'll give you an example. What say if the GPS is not working properly, the student will say, oh yes, I will call the master. Alright, but if say tomorrow one of the VHF stops working, the student will say, oh, I will use the backup VHF. And the surveyor will tempt you saying that what else will you do? And you say, oh, I'll just use the backup VHF. Or if the course recorder is not functioning, the student will say, that's alright, because in the student's mind, the course recorder doesn't really impact the safety of the vessel. Or if there is a discrepancy in your position between the GPS and what you plot with the sextant, let's say it's open sea, there is no traffic, you say, oh, that's fine. And these are some simple circumstances where you forget to call the master, or you forget to call the master if it's night. You say, in your mind you say, I will not disturb the master, it's night. Or if you say you get a false fire alarm on the panel and you make rounds and you realize there is nothing wrong with that, you forget to call the master. Now of course, if there is a false fire alarm which has not rung throughout the accommodation, you get a fire alarm on the panel, you reset the alarm, you maybe ask somebody to go and check the fire alarm and you find there's nothing wrong, maybe practically you will not call the master because you have not found anything. But when you go for oral examination, any other scenarios where you are in doubt, where you really are not sure, and inspection is of course tells you that there's nothing wrong, but still you have to call the master, at least for the purposes of the orals examination. You must call the master whenever there is a scenario which makes you uncomfortable. So apart from the obvious answers where you call the master, like restricted visibility, heavy weather warning, where the traffic situation bothers you, where there is an emergency like man overboard, or you have to go for rescue of the vessel, there are other circumstances also during routine normal operations, which you may not think is very important, which you may think that doesn't put the safety of the ship, cargo or crew in danger, but still you have to call the master. Whether you do it practically or not, I'm not going to discuss that. Master standing orders will also mention the same, and whether it is night, whether you think it's important or not, that is beyond the point. You have to call the master, you have to notify the master, even if the GPS conked off for 5 minutes and after that it's back to the same, you compare the position, everything is fine. If in theory you have to call the master. Alright, and this is where the students are lacking, and the surveyors have been telling me that even though we keep prompting the students, it could be sometimes like preparing the vessel for heavy weather. The students mention everything, but they forget to call the master. They forget to inform the engine room head. So remember, as a second mate candidate, when you go for orals, remember, it does not matter. You call the master. If you feel there is any kind of a situation, even if you can handle it on your own, it doesn't matter. You call the master. So the surveyor might say, there's a big group of fishing boats here. What will you do? And you will say, I'll make a broad alteration, of course. And the surveyor might say, but that will take you all the away from the track. And you will say, it doesn't matter, I'll come back to the track, it's open sea. The surveyor will say, okay, is there anything else you have to do? You will say, no, I'll just come back to the track once the fishing boat is clear. And no, in theory, you have to call master because you are going away from the track, and maybe what I'm talking about is a significant deviation from your voyage. Those are the words. So I thought I'll make this video today that if you are making a significant deviation from the intended track, although it's open sea, you will come back to the track when required, you still have to call the master, at least in theory. Maybe you are not doing it in practice, but at least in theory. Many masters actually put down in the standing orders saying that if it is more than 2.5 miles, 2.5 miles is the CPA from the intended track, you have to call me. Sometimes they do that. Why I said 2.5 miles is because I think that's what was there in my standing orders. But different masters could have different requirements. So make sure to call the master in any other circumstances also which disturbs normal operation, although you may not feel it is dangerous. So let me know if you have any doubts or concerns about this point that I am making. But before you go for orals, make sure you put that in your mind as to when to call the master, apart from the normal circumstances as well. It's very important when you go for second mate, because the surveyor wants to see whether the master can trust you or not, and you must use this judiciously, you must use this as much as you can, because that puts the trust in the surveyor's mind that tomorrow if things go wrong, you will call the master, you will call the chief officer, you will call the chief engineer if required. Alright guys, so I'll keep this video short now. I think it's long enough. Let me know if you want me to cover some other topics, or let me know what you think about this video. Bye for now.